The morning after Eze's burial, Amara woke to a silence she had never known before. The small mud house that had once been filled with her father's comforting voice now felt empty and cold. She sat quietly beside the doorway, staring at the carved wooden walking staff Eze had always carried to the farm. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she remembered his final words. For 14 years, he had been her only friend, her only family, and the only person who looked beyond the face the villagers mocked. Now he was gone, leaving Amara completely alone. She took a deep breath, wiped away her tears, and whispered to herself, "I promised Father I would be strong." There was no one left to fetch water, gather firewood, or work the small piece of farmland that provided her only food. From that day on, every burden rested on her shoulders. Life became harder with each passing day. Before sunrise, Amara carried her basket to the farm and worked until the scorching afternoon sun covered her face with sweat. She harvested yams, cassava, and vegetables, hoping to earn enough money to survive by selling them in the village market. But as soon as she arrived, people turned away from her. Some refused to buy anything her hands had touched, believing she carried misfortune. Others whispered, "There goes the cursed daughter who brought death to her own mother." Their cruel words pierced her heart like sharp arrows. As the sun began to set, Amara walked back home with most of her crops still unsold, carrying not only the heavy basket on her head, but also the painful weight of rejection. Yet, even through the pain, her refused to hate those who despised her. Deep inside her heart, her father's voice still echoed, "Never let the world change the goodness inside you." Those words became the only light guiding Amara through the darkness of her lonely life. One bright morning, after finishing her work on the farm, Amara balanced a clay pot on her head and walked alone to the village stream. It was the same stream where the women of Umuoke gathered every day, but she always waited until they had left because she wanted to avoid their cruel words. As she bent down to fill her pot with clear water, she noticed a young man standing on the opposite side of the stream. His clothes were old and worn, his feet were dusty from a long journey, and his shoulders carried the marks of years of hard work. His name was Obina, a poor farmer from a neighboring village who had recently arrived in Umuoke, hoping to rent a small piece of land and build a better life. Unlike everyone else, Obina did not stare at Amara with fear or disgust. Instead, he walked over with a gentle smile and said, "Please, allow me to help you." Before she could answer, he carefully lifted the heavy clay pot onto her head. Amara stood frozen with surprise. For a moment, she wondered if Obina had mistaken her for someone else. No stranger had ever spoken to her with such kindness. As they walked together along the narrow path, Obina introduced himself and asked about her life. Amara hesitated, afraid that he would walk away the moment he learned who she was. Quietly, she told him about the whispers, the loneliness, and how the villagers believed she was cursed. Obina listened without saying a word until she had finished. Then he looked at her with a warm smile and said, "I do not judge people by what others say. I judge them by the goodness I see in their hearts." His words stopped Amara at her tracks. No one had ever looked beyond her appearance or spoken to her with such genuine kindness. As she watched Obina walk away, a feeling she had almost forgotten slowly returned to her heart: hope. Over the next few weeks, Obina found himself returning to the stream at the same time every morning. At first, he and Amara exchanged only a few simple greetings before going their separate ways. But as the days passed, their conversations became longer. Obina discovered that Amara was hardworking, gentle, and always willing to help others, even those who had treated her with cruelty. Amara learned that Obina had lost both of his parents when he was still a young boy and had spent most of his life working on other people's farms just to survive. Although he owned almost nothing, he carried no hatred or bitterness in his heart. Whenever they met, Amara found herself smiling a little more. For the first time since her father's death, the loneliness that had filled her heart began to fade. One peaceful evening, as the setting sun painted the sky with shades of orange and gold, Amara and Obina stood quietly beside the river before it was time to return home. Obina looked into her eyes, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Amara, there is something I have wanted to tell you." She looked at him in surprise. "Since the day I met you, I have seen a kindness in your heart unlike anything I have ever known. I know what the people of this village say about you, but I do not believe them. I do not care how you look or what others think. I only care about the woman you truly are." Amara's heart began to race. She could hardly believe the words she was hearing. Obina gently took her hands and smiled. "Amara, will you marry me? Will you allow us to build a life together?" Tears filled her eyes as she struggled to speak. No man had ever looked at her with love. No one had ever asked for her hand in marriage. Overwhelmed with emotion, she finally nodded and whispered, "Yes, I will marry you." As they smiled at one another, the gentle breeze carried ripples across the river, as though destiny itself had quietly witnessed the beginning of a new chapter in their lives.
If you're enjoying this story, please support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support truly means a lot. Now let's continue our journey.
The news of Obina's proposal spread through Umuoke faster than the morning wind. Before long, the entire village was talking about it. Some people laughed until tears rolled down their faces, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Only a poor man would marry a woman like Amara, they whispered. They are the perfect pair. One has no beauty, the other has no wealth. On the day of the traditional marriage, many villagers gathered, not to celebrate, but to mock them. Some came only to witness what they called the wedding of two unfortunate souls. As Amara walked quietly beside Obina, the cruel words followed them wherever they went. She lowered her head, trying to hide the tears in her eyes. But Obina gently held her hand and whispered, "Do not listen to them, Amara. Today you become my wife, and from this day forward, you will never face this world alone." Hearing those words, Amara smiled through her tears and walked proudly beside the man who had chosen her above everyone else. After the simple wedding ceremony, Amara and Obina moved into this small mud house on the edge of his farmland. The house was old, its roof leaked whenever heavy rain fell, and they owned very little. Some nights, they shared only one simple meal, yet they thanked God for every blessing they received. From sunrise until sunset, Amara walked faithfully beside her husband, helping him plant yams, cassava, and vegetables. They laughed together, prayed together, and encouraged one another through every hardship. For the first time since losing her father, Amara finally knew what it felt like to belong to a family again. Although the villagers continued to mock them, neither Amara nor Obina realized that every step they took together was bringing an ancient promise closer to fulfillment. Far beyond the eyes of men, the river goddess watched over them in silence, waiting for the night when destiny would finally reveal its hidden purpose. On the first night after their wedding, Amara fell into a deep and peaceful sleep unlike any she had ever known. In her dream, she found herself standing once again beside the sacred river. The water glowed with a soft blue light, and the night was so still that even the wind seemed to be listening. Slowly, the river goddess rose gracefully from the water, just as she had appeared to Eze and Adeaze many years earlier. Amara immediately fell to her knees, her heart pounding with fear and reverence. The river goddess smiled gently and said, "Do not be afraid, Amara. The years of sorrow, rejection, and loneliness were never meant to destroy you. They were preparing you for this moment. The man who chose you did not see your face, he saw your heart. Because Obina remained faithful to love instead of listening to the voices of men, I will now bless the home you have built together. Your tears have ended. A new season has begun." As the river goddess slowly stretched out her hand, a brilliant blue light spread across the river, and the water shimmered like thousands of stars, and everything around Amara slowly disappeared into darkness. At sunrise, Amara awoke with her heart beating fast. The dream felt so real that she could still remember every word the river goddess had spoken, yet she kept it to herself. Meanwhile, Obina picked up his farming tools and walked toward his fields as he did every morning. But the moment he arrived, he stopped in complete disbelief. The weak crops he had planted only days before had become strong and healthy overnight. Thick yam vines covered the rich soil, tall cassava plants swayed gently in the breeze, and the vegetables were already ready for harvest. Even the fruit trees that had never produced anything before were now bending under the weight of ripe fruit. Birds sang joyfully above the fields as if they were celebrating a miracle. Overcome with emotion, Obina fell to his knees and whispered, "Thank you, Almighty God. Only you could do this." Before long, news of the miraculous harvest spread throughout Umuoke. The same villagers who had once laughed at the poor farmer now stood speechless, staring at his flourishing land. Their mockery turned to amazement, but none of them knew that this extraordinary miracle was only the beginning of the ancient promise the river goddess had sworn to keep.